You know, it's funny, isn't it? Do you know what's funny? I love books. I made a point that I love books over and above things like internet, for example. Well, there's pros and cons of both. So I'll actually say I enjoy internet as well, because I do. But I love books. Here's something that's quite funny. I've got several versions of Jose Silva's, mind control method, Silva method books under different titles. And I've got some from back in the early 80s when it was kind of first very, very popular. And one of the things I remember from Jose Silva's Silva mind control method books and courses, I never did the courses, but I had several books, is the technique called subjective communication. I'll say a few things. Now, fair enough, it's all very well for a teacher or a book or a course to put across to the course taker or to the reader that we must learn to meditate. The greatest thing we can do for ourselves in life is to learn to meditate. But the sorry fact is that most people won't. It's not that they can't. Anyone can meditate. For example, what did you have for breakfast? Do you remember? You just meditated. Okay, that was, what did you have for breakfast? That's 6 words. Do you remember? That's 9 words. You just meditated. That's 12 words. That's 12 words. And you meditated before those 12 words were up. You meditated after, what did you have for breakfast? You meditated as the direct and exact specific instant result of 6 words. You didn't have to go into a cave for 26 years. You didn't have to go to a yoga instructor. You meditated then as the direct, immediate result of 6 words that I asked you. What did you have for breakfast? I've just asked you again, and you just meditated again. There you go. It's all very well for a course or a teacher to tell us we gotta meditate. The best thing we can do for ourselves is to learn to meditate. But most won't, because it's bloody boring. So they think. Most people will say that. Most people who won't or don't want to, or to want to not ever learn to meditate, state that meditation is boring. It isn't, actually. Just to say that, it isn't. It's not boring at all. But a lot of people will say that it's boring. Okay? And you've got to take this seriously. Because a lot of people won't meditate, won't learn to meditate, won't show an interest in learning to meditate or in meditation as a subject or an art or a technique because they've convinced themselves that it's boring. So this neg word, boring, you gotta give it some respect. You've got no choice. Now, the point that I'm making is this. I asked an AI chat if it knew what the technique of subjective communication is. Why? Because I've been using AI chat to help me to put together reams and reams and reams of very specific types of positive affirmations for very specific outcomes. Okay? We'll get more into that. I don't need to list that just now. And I remembered the subjective communication technique that Jose Silva teaches in his books and courses. And I thought, a faster way, even than positive affirmations or even sigils, though you can make a sigil for a particular subjective communication, and you can make a subjective communication for a particular sigil, sure. Perhaps a faster way even than sigilizing something is to do a subjective communication upon it. Does that sound confusing? Shall I clarify? Let's clarify it. That's 5 minutes so far. Doesn't matter if this talk is 10 minutes. It'll make a module. As an example to illustrate what I'm driving at, if you're struggling with a person, a partner, a business partner, partner in crime, your other half, whatever, and you've been looking for a way to influence them, I'm not going to qualify what I just said. If you are looking for a way to influence them, are you with me? Then this is what Jose Silva instructed on his version of subjective communication about specifically. And in his books, let's make it absolutely plain. I'm going to make a video and splice it in here where I'm literally reading from his book. But just now, I'm going to outline his technique. The technique is this. Once you've done the relaxation procedure, the counting down from 100 to 0, and whatever visualizations you're required to do, you need to do whatever, you call up in front of you at normal one-to-one conversational distances, say from where I am to where you are, if you're standing or sitting or whatever, you call up that person's higher self. Well, what does that person's higher self look like? Well, it looks like them. Just imagine they are in the room with you and you're talking to them. You then ask your higher self. You don't speak directly at them, you can, but a much more subjective way, because this is what the meaning of subjective is. You ask your higher self, or you communicate your wishes and desires to your higher self, and you ask your higher self to convey that wish, want, or need to their higher self. You give your emotions, your feelings, your desires, your wishes to your higher self, and ask your higher self to communicate those wishes and desires to their higher self. Let's face it, in life in general, if you're struggling with somebody or something, doesn't matter, communicating from your middle self, this self here, in whatever ways you do, it's always going to be emotional and an attempt at coercion, persuasion, manipulation. We're all doing it all the time, 24/7. We are attempting to persuade, coerce, and manipulate one another. Every single one of us. And if you're attempting to persuade, coerce, and manipulate somebody else, you are giving them energy and power over you. They always know it. It always gives them power. And it always takes some power from you. Always. Attempts at persuasion, coercion, and manipulation most often fall on hard ground, are not effective unless you're utilizing fancy linguistics, poetry, poesy, prophecy, creeping, empowering them and they're enjoying it, seduction techniques and they're lapping it up. But even then they could turn around and say, bog off at the end of the day. Couldn't they? If you're attempting to use persuasion, coercion and manipulation, you're not necessarily onto a winning streak in that regards. Think about it. If you're trusting your needs, wishes, wants, desires to your higher self and trusting your higher self to communicate that to their higher self so that their higher self channels it down through their physiology, that's an NLP term, then in communicating this subjective thing, your subjective needs, wants and desires, you're communicating what they are to your higher self, from your higher self to their higher self, and from their higher self down into physicality, down into their and your physiques. You're basically communicating that you're also willing to change and transform and flow and give and take. Because that's what subjective communication is. You're talking about a subject. You're discussing a subject from a higher point of view to your higher self, requesting that that's from your higher self to their higher self, and down into your physiques, back into your physiques, having sought that your higher self, your higher selves, discuss this with one another. This is an essence of true magic. This seeking of the higher self to do the work for you, not of you attempting to manipulate somebody else. You do it invisibly, without them knowing, showing a love within the universe, showing a wish for something, a desire within the universe, not trying to manipulate someone else. Okay? So I just asked AI to produce a course in what subjective communication is. And I changed the question. The first time, it didn't give me any of the kernel of the technique that Jose Silva spells out clearly in all of his books and all of his courses. So rearranged the question, I put it in a different way, and it's still in 2 medium length answers to my question, still did not give me it still did not give me the kernel of what Jose Silva's actual technique of subjective communication is and entails. The AI did not. Now, this is what I mean about a love of books over internet, because I've noticed lately that some of the AI apps are actually quite shallow. If you're looking for depth in anything, you can't really rely on an AI. It can give you outlines and generics, and it can follow in the lines of what the fashions seem to be online, but it can't really give you any depth. Now, this is a beginning and an inkling into the value that humanity and humans have over the robot, over the android, over AI. There are certain things that AI cannot do that humans can do, and will continue to do forevermore. And it comes down to both their lower natures and their higher natures. Okay? An AI does not and cannot have a lower and a higher nature. Though a human, and especially one who is interested in wizardry, can communicate with an AI and utilize an AI as if it does have a lower, a middle, and a higher nature. A wizard can make a wizard of an AI. An AI cannot make a wizard out of a wizard. Okay, we're getting deep and philosophical there. So for me, I'm probably going to read what Jose Silva actually wrote in his book. So I'll splice that video on. So learn to go to your books. Learn to read to me. Learn to read to one another. Learn to read and go back to the originals. Because despite my 2 attempts at quite involved questions, very clear questions, the AI did not, and I reckon could not, and also will not, instruct me on the very techniques of the subjective communication technique. And the reason I say will not is because the quest for what? In industry and in employment and work and in government and in modern life, generally speaking, the quest for obeyance, what's the word for that? Alexa, synonyms for obeyance.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Alexa, synonyms for obeying.
Synonyms for obeying meaning conform. Give in.
That's the word. Alexa, stop. In today's workplace and industrial focus on conformity, because that's what most training is about. You take any training in employment nowadays, it's all about how and if you conform. It's all about conformity. All training courses are about conformity. All training courses are about conformity. So Got to remember what my point is there. What's my point? Where's my point? In today's professional world, industry, workaday, workplace, employment focuses on conformity as a thing. Jose Silva's subjective communication technique gifts to us a kernel of magic. That is partly what magic is about. I've come to say that the best way, if not the only way, to truly do something that involves people, especially resistant people, or especially peoples you might assume may become resistant or unbelieving, because they're conforming to whatever it is they're conforming to. One of the most powerful ways, if not the only way, to overcome the resistance towards you that they have because they're conforming to their whatever they're conforming to, is subjective communication. Is to take what it is you desire, give it to your higher self, and seek that your higher self communicates that to their higher self for channeling back into your physiques, for expressing back through your physiques and physical worlds, your spheres of sensory compaction, or whatever else the great authors in magic and manifestation talk about, whatever phrases they use. The best way to persuade, if you like, for want of better words, is to use subjective communication, because therefore you don't have to make any effort persuading. You don't have to sit with them in an argument. You don't have to attempt to lay on verbals. You don't have to try and think up stuff. You just ask your higher self to convey your wishes to their higher self, what your desires are, your long list of desires, wants, needs, and fetishes to their higher self, for channeling back into your physiques and back into your real worlds. They never need to know you've made that request of the universe. They never need to know that. And what you're doing is you're releasing the need to dominate them. You're releasing the need to persuade them. You're just letting that completely go. And that's release. That's mentally, emotionally, psychically healthy for you. That to release that, to let that go. To let go of the need to manipulate and perhaps dominate somebody else or control someone else or control a circumstance. You're merely asking. And in your asking, because you're releasing, you're also making it clear to the universe that you're also willing to adapt and change and shapeshift your own self and sphere and set of circumstances to fit your half of the vision, to fit your half of that style, to fit your half of that communication, whatever's going on there, whatever reality you're cooking up. You're communicating to your higher self that you're also willing to change what it is you need to change about you in order to be the right shape to manifest this. You're not coming head to head with somebody else. You're not engaging in this constant and creating a checkmate situation. you're creating harmony, you're creating a flow, you're creating a request, you're creating a dream that you can both adapt into. That's 25 minutes. I've ranted on enough. I'll find those other bits and edit this to suit. Okay, thank you.